I recently got asked what would I actually build personally if I wasn't now in the spoiled YouTuber category of I get review samples of graphics cards and things like that. And so I was really thinking hard about that, and here's my choices I've settled in on. So, and then I'll look at how you could pare this back at different price points. So I think we can build a system that can crush absolutely every game in existence and do it for, 1,500-1,600 bucks. We'll see if I'm right about that. Let's throw this together. So I think for the CPU, if you want the absolute best gaming experience on a CPU right now, you get yourself a 7800X3D from AMD. This is going to be incredibly competitive with even Intel's 14900K, which is more expensive, draws more power, and has had some recent stability issues. And then the motherboard platform on the 7800X3D is going to offer it a lot of future upgradability if needed. And AMD has even announced that their next 9000 series of processors, at least before they launch the 3D V-Cache versions, won't be any faster at gaming than this. So we'll have to, the point is this is going to be absolutely crushing any game you have and will still be absolutely top of the line or near the top of the line for time to come. Now, where a lot of people waste money on their build is on a motherboard. So once you've selected your CPU, you need a motherboard. Now, the thing is, I'm on PC Part Picker here, not sponsored by them or anything. It's just a convenient place to throw this together. Once you've selected a CPU, you can click on the motherboards and it'll sort ones that are compatible. This CPU takes the AM5 platform, and I can sort prices low to high. The thing is, you'll notice that the A620 motherboards are going to be the lowest end, and then the B650s are going to be better, but they're not all created equal. Now, while I'm not a motherboard expert, what I'm doing when I'm looking for a motherboard is, for one thing, you need to make sure it has all the connections you want, USB connections. If you want built-in Wi-Fi, that's something to look for. Personally, I don't want that. I want to plug in directly with an Ethernet cable. And you can buy Wi-Fi adapters in the future if you need them. So you want to look at all of that kind of stuff. But then also you can look at what's the quality of like the VRMs. Hardware Unboxed has a big roundup of a whole bunch of the B650 motherboards. And in the latest batch, you can see that some actually start to thermal throttle on higher-end CPUs when running for a long time. So I'm not saying that's going to happen to everybody all the time, but if they're going to cost about the same, you want to find one that's performing well for the cost. But again, I feel like a lot of people spend way more on a motherboard than they need to. So I'm sorting prices low to high. I'm looking mostly for B650s. Because I'm not interested in the lower-end A620 platform. And then I'm looking at these names, and I'm going to look for something that's performing pretty well on that VRM testing from Hardware Unboxed. Like, first I'm like, okay, a B650MK. What is that? Where do we find that here? Well, if I look at that here, we can actually find that the B650MK is performing a lot worse than some of these other ones up here. Whereas if we look at... this ASRock B650M Pro RS, that's performing near the top, but I can find that, let's see, I think I saw that one here not too far up the list, so at about $135. So at $135, we're only a little more expensive than the absolute cheapest B650Ms. And but we're actually getting ones that perform well. Let's see. This one's only $100, but I don't think this one performed quite as well. B650M HM.2 Plus, B650M HDV2. So it's not quite the same thing. So I think this one didn't perform as well down here. So yeah, it's looking like we want to get into the better performing patch of motherboards here. This is one of the cheapest ones to get us there, and away we go. Also, another thing I'll mention is I don't really care what my PC looks like. Actually, I should get that wrong. I actually don't want any RGB. I want a black box that doesn't have distracting lights when I turn off all the lights in my room and play video games. That's my personal preference. So again, you could spend more on what things look like, all of that. But here we go. Now, this CPU is going to need a cooler, but it actually doesn't draw a huge amount of power compared to something like Intel's 14900K. If you get a 14900K, you want to get the biggest, most expensive cooler you can possibly get, whereas Whereas if you're on a 7800X 3D, honestly, this Thermalright Peerless Assassin for $34 is going to completely get the job done with no issues and save us a huge amount of money on this system. So we now have that platform set up. We need some memory. So for AMD-based CPUs, on the current batch, AMD recommends DDR5 6000 series, 6000 speed. So we're going to go with that as kind of a sweet spot there. And then I want 32 gigabytes of RAM using 2 sticks. So I'm going to sort for 2 by 16 gigabytes, and I'm going to sort prices low to high and look at what our options are. The next thing I'm looking for is CAS latency. Lower is better. So I'm checking if any of these stand out in terms of value. And it looks like we have a few offering CL30 at a lower price than a lot of the other ones. Now, a whole bunch of these are coming in here right at $95. Notice that these are basically all the same. So we got a whole bunch of options here at CL30 for $95. Personally, I feel a little better about the Team Group brand. I've bought things from them before and had absolutely no issues with it. Not that there's necessarily anything wrong with silicon power, but at the same price, I've had good experiences with this product, so I'm going to go with it. And so we're going to get that one. So we've got the whole CPU motherboard platform set up, and it's absolutely top of the line. The next thing we want is kind of a no compromises gaming performance, but also without completely wasting money. And I did a recent video looking at the 4070 Ti Super up against the 4090, which is the best thing you can possibly buy. Now, the thing is, a 4090 is ridiculously expensive. Now, if you just have money to throw at things, it's a great graphics card. It's incredibly powerful, but the cheapest ones are about $1,700. I want this entire build to be under $1,700, not just on one component. The next step down is a 4080. These are still about $1,000. Looks like this one's discounted to $950 right now. And by 4080 and 4080 Super, they perform basically identically. Anyway, so 4080 Super is around $950 right now, $1,000 or so. But if you step back to the 4070 Ti Super, you still have 16 gigabytes of VRAM, and you're not taking a huge step back from the 4080 Super, but now we're dropping down to, looks like the cheapest one's $770. So I'm going to go ahead and slot that in, because if you take a look at this, the 4070 Ti Super, sure, the 4090 is often 50% faster or better, but if I'm targeting 1440p gaming, I can even use like the RT Overdrive mode, that's the path tracing mode in Cyberpunk, with DLSS quality, which still looks quite good at 1440p, and I can get around a 60 FPS experience. In more demanding areas, it will dip below that. But the thing is, we can also kick on, if you can get near 60, I think between 50 and 60 FPS is kind of a baseline. You can then kick frame generation on, and it'll smooth things out quite a bit and still feel pretty responsive and look pretty good if you're coming from a baseline around that 50 to 60 FPS line. And so I think you're going to get a great experience on the 4070 Ti Super. You have the 16 gigabytes of VRAM. And yes, there's some AMD alternatives to look at, but again, I'm looking at what would I build personally. And personally, I am interested in playing single-player games like Alan Wake 2, Cyberpunk, and playing with all the cool new visual features, the path tracing modes, all of that. So I would personally make that choice and go with the 4070 Ti Super here. I will also look at, if we want to reduce the budget on this build, how I would pull it down further. But the 4070 Ti Super, again, if I kind of scroll through some of the results here, it at 1440p crushes everything with reasonable settings. You can even make the heavy ray tracing modes work out. Native resolution 4K gaming isn't an unbelievably great experience, but if you kick on DLSS, you can always get a good experience still with extremely high settings. And so yeah, this 4070 Ti Super, while not actually being the most powerful GPU on the market, I don't think there's a single game out there that you can't get a great experience at 1440p or at 4K resolution. The heaviest path tracing options might not be for it, but I think 1440p is a better value place to be playing at anyway. So I'm going to go with that. So that's the most critical components for our computer from a gaming performance side of things. So now we just got to kind of fill in the rest of the details. So for storage, I like to have a lot of games installed on my system at the same time. And a lot of games are really big these days. So I'm going to want 2 terabytes. So I'm going to kind of filter capacity at 2000 gigabytes. I'm going to sort for SSDs, although really I want NVMEs, not just the SATA SSDs. But I'm just going to sort prices low to high, look at what it costs for 2 terabytes, and look at if anything jumps out as being cool, particularly good value. So the cheapest you can get 2 terabytes on a SATA drive is $94, but you don't have to go up much to get the NVMe drives at about $100. And then are there any that particularly pop out as potentially being a better deal than the others? Okay, looks like some of these, okay, the Team Group MP33 I know has SLC cache, but it's still a PCIe Gen 3 drive. It's not incredibly fast. Honestly, it's probably perfectly good for gaming. Although the MP33 Pro is only $10 more. And then it looks like if we go up to $115, we get the Team Group MP44L. This one is a PCIe 4.0 drive. If I pull up the details on this one does have SLC cache, which can help speeds in certain situations. And again, it looks like it is PCIe 4.0. It's not the fastest one out there, but these speeds are absolutely good enough to get top-end gaming experience and just general PC usage experience out there. And it's not that much more money than the absolute cheapest stuff. And I'm getting 2 terabytes for a little over $100. I'm going to go ahead and slot that one into the system. And so now we really just need a case and a power supply. We're under $1,500 so far. So choosing a case, this is very much personal preference here. Like I said, I don't want RGB. I want a black box that fits my components. So I want a big black box that's easy to work with. I'm not trying to build anything small. I don't want a bunch of RGB lighting, but also I just want the case to come with some fans because buying fans separately will cost more. And like I said, I'm not looking for some super fancy RGB lighting or anything like that on the fans. So now I'm just going to sort prices low to high and take a look at what sorts of cases are popping up here. And I'm looking for something that kind of just jumps out as probably being a good size, having a mesh front panel to get me, good airflow. But I don't really prefer white builds. Otherwise, this one looks kind of interesting. Do they have the black version of this one? I kind of just want a black box. that's sort of what I'm looking at here. I'm not I don't have an encyclopedic knowledge of every case that I'm looking at here. A bunch of these would probably work. But I'm, like I said, just kind of scrolling through to see what kind of jumps out here. A whole bunch of these would probably have been fine. Here's the black version of that case that I was looking at there. It's a little bit more expensive. But if we pull up the details on this one, this can fit a 368 millimeter radiator at the top or front if you want. Looks like it has space for 4090 graphics cards. We could look at the exact details on that. Scrolling through, it does look like it comes with case fans, which is one of the big things that I'm looking at. And it does have USB Type-C port and on the looks like the front panel kind of stuff. Yeah, it has the mesh front panel. It looks like it comes with 2 large fans pre-installed. No, 3 fans pre-installed, 2 in the front and 1 in the back. So this looks like it's everything I'm looking for. It's a fairly inexpensive black box that can fit giant graphics cards and comes with fans and no RGB lighting. Looking at the overall, yeah, it can fit up to 400 millimeter GPUs. That's awesome. So we can not worry about GPUs, future upgrades being too big or anything like that. So there's probably a ton of other cases that would be absolutely fine. And if you're trying to build some kind of visual art piece, this is probably not the case for you. But like I said, I want a black box that I just don't notice when I turn the lights off. Anyway, so I'm going to go with that. Now we just need a power supply. For a power supply, I'd prefer to go with an 850 watt power supply that's fairly highly rated and at least 80 plus gold efficiency. So I'm going to sort wattage to 850 watts, and then I'm going to look at what is available. Sorting prices low to high, see if anything jumps out at me. If you're not familiar with a lot of these power supplies, I recommend the PSU Cultists tier list, where you can look up a lot of power supplies and get a kind of a general idea that they're not total garbage. Because the power supply being garbage is one of the few things that can actually just like wreck your PC. Not that's a super common issue, but you know. Anyway, so as I scroll down here, I am noticing. Okay, Seasonic makes good stuff. I believe their Focus Plus Gold line is quite good. This is $105. If I scroll down a little bit more, though, I notice that they have their ATX 3.0 version, which I believe then could actually... you know how a lot of the NVIDIA GPUs these days have those 12-volt power connector deals? I think this one could natively support that. Which means that I wouldn't have to have, so while I don't care too much about what the build looks like, it looks like I wouldn't have to have little dongle splitter things kind of cluttering up the cables in the build. So that looks pretty interesting. 850 watts should be enough for pretty much anything. I ran a 4090 and a 7800X3D on an 850 watt power supply with absolutely no issues. You might have more problems if you're trying to run something like a 14900K, but this should absolutely be more than enough for both what we're building now and future upgrades, which is one of the nice things to think about with power supplies is future upgradability. So we have everything we need. Regarding operating system, because I have a legitimate Windows license, it should be transferable with my Windows login to future builds and things like that. So I should be good to go on that. I already have a monitor and keyboard and mouse and all of that. Other people might need to look into those separately. But here we go. So I was hoping to come in around $1,500 or $1,600. Looks like we're up at $1,660. But I would call this a no compromises build, other than the fact that sure, technically a 4090 is better. But like, okay, if you're not just throwing massive amounts of money to chase the absolute best, this will absolutely crush anything. And it's not, some astronomically expensive computer. Now, that being said, for those of you interested in, okay, it's a bit out of my price range, what would I do personally to pare this back? Since I'm more interested in single-player games, where I'm more likely GPU limited than CPU limited, the first place I would save some money is on the CPU. While the 7800X3D is amazing, you could stay on the same platform and build with a Ryzen 7600, and that comes in at $184 right now. And this one doesn't, it costs less, and as long as you're GPU limited, this still has great gaming performance, and you're probably not going to run into a lot of issues. You just might end up wanting to upgrade sooner than had you stuck on the 7800X3D, or if you're chasing esports performance, where oftentimes you might actually turn down graphic settings and be CPU limited, then you might run into a bit less performance on this type of platform. This one would come with a box cooler if you really wanted to cut out this $34 right here. So I'll leave that kind of up to you. The same motherboard and RAM would be great, and I think we're already great value. Other places we could then cut down without really losing performance is we could cut down to a 1 terabyte SSD and maybe not go PCIe Gen 4. Without really affecting gaming performance at all. So if I sort prices low to high and go down to, a 1 terabyte SSD, okay, there's a few different options here. Again, I'm just kind of scrolling through to see if one kind of stands out to me. The Team Group MP33 Pro, I think, still has the SLC cache and is not one of the lowest end. I think it's at least still TLC and not QLC. So, that cuts a bit off the budget as well. Let's see. So we're now down to under $1,500. So if you needed to be under $1,500, you could cut down to this point. Now, if you need to cut further, like I said, you could drop the CPU cooler. And the other place you could cut without losing actual gaming performance would be the power supply. Although, again, the 4070 Ti Super is great, but, you could cut down to a 4070 Super instead of the 4070 Ti Super. The main disadvantage here is you're now going to go down to 12 gigabytes of VRAM instead of 16 gigabytes of VRAM, but the 4070 Ti Super is usually only about 15% faster. If you kind of scroll through a whole bunch of my benchmarks on this, sometimes it's 20% or 30% faster when that VRAM and memory bandwidth can come into play. But again, in most situations, it's more like a 15 to 20% difference. So it's the 4070 Super for 1440p gaming would still be a pretty great choice. So I will say that, okay, we could cut this down to a 4070 Super. So if we do that, still getting pretty awesome performance. These come in at $580 at the lowest. So if we slot that in, we are now coming in at $1,270. So we're under $1,300. So if you had to come in with a $1,300 build, this looks pretty great. If we need to cut down below that point, again, we can cut down the power supply. I think we could get away with a 650 watt power supply. So if we sort 80 plus gold or better for 650 watts. Let's see what pops up here, if anything looks particularly decent. MSI Mag, 650 watt, fully modular, 80 plus gold. Honestly, you're probably going to be fine. That's $80, so you're saving a bit of money there. You could cut the CPU cooler to save a little bit more money, and you're now down at a $1,200 build that still has some pretty excellent performance. If I was going to cut down further than this, I would say that the 4070 Super, it's pretty awesome. However, a 7800 XT from AMD, when you're not using heavy ray tracing, is generally only a little bit faster. And it has 16 gigabytes of VRAM instead of 12, so there's a lot to be said for it. The 4070 Super is still usually faster, and in some heavy ray tracing workloads, it can actually be a lot faster. Not that it's necessarily giving an amazing experience in the heaviest ray tracing workloads anyway. It can be a little bit questionable. In lighter ray tracing workloads, like maybe Avatar Frontiers of Pandora, something like that, it's maybe 20% faster or so. So the 4070 Super is generally faster than a 7800 XT, although the 7800 XT is going to cost us a lot less. Still give excellent performance, and will get you 16 gigabytes of VRAM, which is certainly nothing to sneeze at. And the 7800 XT, it looks like we could get that as low as $470 right now. So we can save another $100 off the build. So it looks like we could make an $1,100 build that is still a really excellent gaming system. That I think if you're playing anything at 1440p, or you're going to be absolutely happy with something like this. So anyway, so I showed you guys what I would build personally. It looks like it would come out a little over $1,600, and then I've showed you how I would personally cut it down if my budget was lower, getting all the way down to $1,100 if needed, and still giving us a system that is very upgradable. It has really good performance right now, and like I said, I don't really think we're compromising on much of anything. This is a pretty awesome system. So I hope you guys enjoyed the video, found this useful and or interesting. Again, even on the 7800 XT base system at $1,100, you're going to be getting really, let me scroll over here so you can see the results here. You can see the frame rates in these latest and greatest games at a wide variety of settings, and generally, tweaking things a bit to not use the most demanding ray tracing in the world. At 1440p, things are great. Even at even at 4K resolution, you can kind of tweak settings to make it pretty awesome as well. So yeah, I think you get a really great experience on all of these systems. And huge thank you to channel members who have directly supported the channel financially by clicking the join button down there. That is absolutely incredible. Huge thank you for doing that. Huge thank you to everybody who can't do that as well. Totally understand. Subscribers, viewers, commenters, everybody, you're all what makes this channel possible. Can't believe how much support I've gotten over here. It's really, truly incredible. I was thinking about that the other day. Mind-blowing to me how far the channel has come since I randomly started doing this as a hobby a few years ago. Anyway, I hope all of you have an excellent day.